The beheading of teacher Samuel Paty in retaliation for showing controversial cartoons of the Prophet Mohammed has once again raised tensions not only in France but across Europe and the Muslim world. The murder reignites the debate about the freedom of speech, religion versus secularism, legal rights versus moral rights, and Western social norms versus Islamic norms. France has vowed to defend the secular values, while some Muslim countries, including Turkey, have criticized French attitudes towards Muslims. So why is France's reaction different to the Muslim world's? Will the latest murder fuel tensions between them? And in a time of multi-sectarian societies, should there be a boundary between secularism and religion? To talk about these issues, I'm joined by Cui Hongjie, Director of the Department for European Studies at the China Institute of International Studies, Professor Joab Toker from the American Graduate School in Paris, Serkan Ural, a political analyst and writer, and Zun Ahmed Khan, visiting fellow at the Belt and Road Strategy Institute at Tsinghua University. That is our topic. This is Dialogue. I'm Zhou Yue. So let me start with you, Joab. Samuel Paty's beheading is reminiscent of the satirical magazine Charlie Hebdo in 2015 because it published the controversial cartoons depicting the Prophet Mohammed that Paty showed to students. So what do you think of this incident, and what does it reveal about the state of French society at the moment?
Well, indeed, the murder, the horrible murder of the teacher about a week ago is, to some extent, reminiscence indeed of the Charlie Hebdo horrible tragedy about 5 years ago. But one should keep in mind in French context, but also in overall context, that we're speaking about a whole continuity of terrorist, murderous attacks over a long period of time, mainly over the last 5-6 years, but it dates back even earlier, when we're speaking about initiatives which are associated with radical Islam, with political radical Islam, and include murders, harassment, and provocations that are perceived by French political class and public opinion as an offensive of radical Islam, and I emphasize radical Islam, to be separated in one's understanding from the Muslim population in France, which is over 10% of the overall population, and which is the largest in Europe. When this horrible murder of the teacher intervened about a week ago, we're speaking about an overall French sphere which is loaded with those debates and those controversies and those questions which actually haunt the French scene for years now. What to do about radical Islamism and how to separate it from the normal protection that the state of France owes each one of its citizens, including, obviously, the Muslim ones.
And about the French society's view of this event, Joab, Macron has hailed Paty for representing the secular, free-thinking values, including the right to mock all religions. But depictions of Muhammad are widely regarded as taboo in Islam and offensive to many Muslims around the world. What does the law in France say about blasphemy, and do French Muslims have the same views on this?
Well, indeed, we are in the heart of the problem and the complexity of the problem. One should understand also it is either unknown or badly appreciated or understood away from French border. The French version of secularism, which is called laïcité, is indeed somehow different from what you'd see in other Western and non-Western countries, because after all, there are many countries on earth, actually the majority of countries on earth, do introduce one way or the other and practice one way or the other a separate way, a separate reality between religion and state. French version of this laïcité, of this secularism, indeed permits every single citizen to practice every religion of his or her choice, or no religion whatsoever, and in the meantime protects the rights of citizens to practice indeed their preferred religion in the private sphere. So we have here a distinction between the private sphere, what you can do at home with your family according to your preferences in terms of lifestyle, and what is the vie de la cité, as the French call it, namely the collective sphere, the one over which the state has power and has laws. And some of French laws, and the most important ones, indeed not only institutionalize the separation between state and religion, namely secularism, namely this laïcité, but also does not recognize blasphemism as a problem. I mean, you can say whatever you wish regarding any religion. You cannot attack or aggress individuals because of their religious faith, but you can criticize or ridiculize any religion of your choice as part of the liberty of expression and liberty of the press. And here comes indeed the confrontation with many millions, hundreds of millions if you wish, in France and away from France in the Muslim Arab world.
And sir, how do Turkish people think about what happened in France and the tit-for-tat between Macron and Erdogan?
The attack is unacceptable because Islam doesn't allow any person to kill any others because of the words or the thoughts. And Turkish people think that terror is not a part of Islam. If he is Muslim, he is not terrorist. If terrorist, he is not Muslim. We heard that this is the Chechen Russian guy, but we don't know the details also. And Turkish people ask that any intelligence service used him for these terrorist attacks. But to think that my colleague mentioned about Macron, there was a hope for Macron, and new regulations were expected, but he failed after this presidency, and it seems he loses the elections next term, so he's trying to be leading the figure of Islamophobia. That is important. Let's see the big picture about that. The new generation of the populism is rising in EU. The Macron's deep conflict started with immigration policies. EU countries didn't deal with the Syrian or the African migrants, you know, but the politicians become more populist. The Macron's response all to this creates greater division. We can see that the Macron's actions are becoming state policies. This killing doesn't let the police to go against the mosques, the Islamic mosques in France or Germany. These, it seems, it's a rising Islamophobia or Turkeyphobia behind this.
Hong Jian, what is your view? Should Macron say things differently? Because some people may blame him for overgeneralizing this by painting a broad picture of Muslim as an extreme religion.
We can find out this major difference between this French viewpoint and also this observation from Turkey side. So we can find out, yeah, it depends on which kind of a strategy you will take. I think, yes, you can try to find some more causes for President Macron's speech on this event, and also some restrict measures to fight against the so-called radical Islamic like that. But of course, I can now, the question for France is, how could it try to make a balance between, the different, requirement from various, different groups. For example, now, maybe for some people who believe in Islam in France, they try to take it as just a single case. It's a beheading event. But of course, for the French government, almost for some political elite, they believe that now it's time to deal with this issue seriously. That is, if there is earth already in France or maybe in Europe at large, to hope this kind of radical, religion or some others. So I think now the question is, once France do something or not, undoubtedly there will be some pressure from inside or outside. For if we are emerging that, once President Macron didn't take any steps at this time, certainly there will be some pressure, big from some local, especially religion or some local people, because as we know, it's not only a single case in the eyes of more and more French people.
And Zun, you're from Pakistan. How do you look at this incident? Because there are many different lenses we can look through. For example, is it freedom of speech versus religious rights, legal rights versus moral rights, or Western values versus Islamic traditions?
Well, I think the perspective coming out of France and also from Turkey, one thing that's pretty clear is that we have a problem of perceiving what is correct, what is tolerable, and how can we actually, I think a bigger question is how can we be accepting of sentiments of a part of the French society, for instance, that has experienced marginalization, and at the same time, where is that line between, for example, some French Muslims feel that they do face discrimination and they become the real victims of these kind of attacks, because even though they condemn the actions of such radical people who obviously do not represent the sentiments and the ideas of majority of Muslims, but as a result, the right-wing sentiment in these countries becomes heated, ignited, and at times, unfortunately, it can be used for political mileage as well. So I think the first thing to understand is that, yes, Islamophobia is a reality. It is something that is confronting various societies. There is an ease with which Muslims become stereotyped with because of such incidents. And there is also a need to have a genuine dialogue to understand what can be a better way to avoid certain incidents which make this minority, over 10% of French population, feel like they're being discriminated against. For instance, we know that, I believe our French panelists can correct me if I'm wrong, but in the past 2 years, in 2018 and 19, the number of attacks against Muslims in France has doubled. And the debates about whether or not Muslim women should be wearing the scarf, there is basic policy of assimilation in France, which is different from the UK, which talks about integrating. And when you talk about assimilation, then where is that line between the private and public sphere? So for instance, is wearing the scarf or speaking in Arabic in public, if it's looked down upon, does that discriminate against a big group of French people? And is there a better way to understand secularism? Yeah. So, but we do need to have dialogue, and the question is not about tolerating, but actually accepting each other and not allowing a group to become easily provoked because of centuries of discrimination, actually, which is the reality for some of the Muslim communities in France.
Joab, I want you to respond to that. Where is the line between public and private? And is it the best way to secularize a major religion in France, considering we have roughly 6 million Muslims living in France? How to reconcile? Obviously, there are differences.
Well, indeed, I rather agree with my colleague from Pakistan regarding the need, first of all, to recognize, indeed, that there are problems, many problems, for a long time regarding the overall situation of migrants and then sons and daughters and grandsons and granddaughters of immigrants from Muslim countries who had arrived in France sometimes 40, 50 years ago and later. They are now French citizens in 100% formally, but they are still being discriminated against regarding the labor market, regarding the overall atmosphere, etc. They are not the only ones to suffer from that, but it's part of the overall problem of French society, which is full of socio-economic parameters, more so than religious or law-binding aspects. However, I will take issue with my colleague in Istanbul who mentioned a few minutes ago that Macron, in a way, was maneuvering over this punctual affair of the last few days in order to fortify somehow, or that's the way I understood his remarks, in order to fortify his political positions as he is endangered by the coming presidential elections, which will take place only in 2.5 years. And as a matter of fact, this is not the case at all. Macron actually is considered to be relatively the favorite come this 2022 elections, and who knows over a 2-year period what happens. On the contrary, Macron was trying to avoid confronting the issues related to Islam in France and secularism, and the question you put to me, Jean, namely, where is exactly the red line or the borderline between the private sphere and the collective state sphere, right? That was actually the most important single issue public sphere, which Macron was trying to avoid since he arrived in power almost 3 years ago. Right, he was postponing and postponing and postponing his position taking regarding this issue. He took those positions about a month ago, and horrible a murder about a week ago, which had even aggravated the overall situation.
Hong Jian, do you agree that Macron doesn't have political motives whatsoever? Because before Paty's murder, Macron vowed to fight Islamist separatism with a new law that will reinforce secularism in France. Obviously, he did put that issue front and center in France.
As we understand that, according to the French law, indeed, it's to uphold a kind of a secular principle to deal with some religion issues. But now, I think now it's another very big problem for French government is there should be a kind of a limitation for this principle, especially now, as we know, more and more people who believe in Islam living in France, and how could they find out the limitation of this kind of so-called the freedom of speech, and how could they try to learn to respect the difference between the different people and the different groups. So I think now the question for President Macron and the French government is, yes, it's right to emphasize that the secular principle is important, is critical for the French politics and for French law. But at the same time, how could the government and also the French society find the solution to deal with this tensions between the diversity of society and also this single principle for the politics for law and for legislation and some other. So I think now, especially also at the same time, not only on this issue, just internal issue, because as we know now, because of the diversity of the demography in French, and also the very, very strong linkage between the the domestic people who believe in Islam and some other people who live in some Muslim countries. So I think there's maybe two kind of balance for French government should take. I mean, this one is this different groups in France, and also the limitation to uphold so-called principle and the relations with other Islamic countries.
And Sir Khan, let's also talk about the geopolitical aspect of this. Obviously, a lot of Muslim states have responded to Macron's positions negatively, and some have even begun to boycott French products. But people also say President Erdogan is using this issue to assert his claim to the Muslim leadership.
Is it not easy to say, but Erdogan has a struggle with Saudis, as you know, because of the Khashoggi case killing, and Saudis are boycotting Turkish goods, and by this way Erdogan raising his voice harder so that he can get support from the other Muslim Islamic states. That is right, but and then get more power to the EU countries. Secondly, France is a member of the Minsk Triple, as you know, and France is accusing Turkey being at the side of the Azerbaijan and giving support to them. And some other members of the EU, they are also giving hard times to Turkey for the membership of the Progress. And France is supporting Greece against Turkey on the Mediterranean issue. And the other side, against France, we can say that the Erdogan is pushing the Islamic world around $100 billion trade with France, and so that he is using and organizing these Muslim countries against France. France trade is more than $9 billion with Turkey also. That is important from that side. And the other side, Macron's France is symbolizing the collapse of the EU values. So Turkish position is different now. They are looking for the partnership with the rising Asia, China, United Kingdom. Then a loser will be Macron and France on this picture. So we say Chinese people's power, Turkey's logistic power, and UK's economical finance power will be 21st century's realities. So Macron and Erdogan has several conflict points, starting from Nagorno-Karabakh, Mediterranean, Iraq, and also Libya issues, as we know. But the point is that from Gaza Strip to Bangladesh to Morocco to Qatar, Iran, Lebanon, and Syrian city of Idlib, lots of people took to streets to protest against the French president. So Macron should stop state projects against Muslims and the other religions.
Zun, I want your take on this. Obviously, this has escalated. Do you think it might evolve into a confrontation between the Muslim world and Europe?
Honestly, I think the first thing that I would like to address here is that just 2 days ago, the Prime Minister of Pakistan, on 28th, the Prime Minister of Pakistan also gave out a statement. And in that statement, I talk about this because I think I'm trying to explain a basic context in which Muslims that feel strongly about Islamophobic sentiment and Islamophobic content, what is their idea and what are they asking for? So in that statement, he said that, we would like a global society in which ideas, religious, any ideas that are sensitive to a community. For instance, he mentioned for the Jewish community as well, there are certain incidents in history that they're sensitive about, and we should respect that. And as Muslims, we want people to respect the Prophet, but we also want respect for Christian ideas as well as Jewish ideas, etc., etc. The point is that whether or not there's a strong sentiment in the Muslim world that they are being targeted, that there is a general idea in Western countries that Muslims are the cause of the problem, despite the fact that Muslim countries have suffered the most because of wars, interventionism.
But do you think boycott of French products and cutting down relationship is the right response?
No. This is not in my personal opinion, it's not the right response. But I would like to request, for example, our panelists from France to think about the fact that actually, for instance, Turkey is the one bearing maximum brunt of the war in Syria. Pakistan was the one bearing maximum brunt of the war in Afghanistan, outside of Afghanistan, of course. And the idea is for both sides to have a conversation to understand what have they been suffering. Muslims have suffered a lot because of Islamic terrorism, and at the same time, a lot of Muslims in Western countries, as well as Muslims at large, are being stereotyped and being clumped together with an extremist idea that is not Islamic from the Muslim perspective. So I don't think knee-jerk reactions, right-wing sentiment in Europe, as well as this kind of sentiment to just boycott and stop the dialogue and to escalate the misunderstandings, actually, which already exist, is a solution at all. But what we genuinely need is an honest dialogue, like which was just mentioned, that there are some deep-rooted problems in the French society that need to be addressed. And for instance, President Macron's response right now to the incident has also been seen as a way of, it doesn't hit the target. It's just showing that we are doing something. Certain organizations have been banned, a mosque has been closed, but that's not the solution. The solution really is to have a conversation to understand what are the ideals that need to be upheld in the future, and what are the sentiments of a society, of a part of the French society that is significant and that does feel that they have been subjected to discrimination.
Okay.
So these are basic things, but I don't think on a global level we will see, this is just an escalated reaction, a knee-jerk reaction that hopefully will calm down.
Joab, how do French people thinking about their products being boycotted in some Muslim countries, and France is now the face of Islamophobia in many people's eyes?
Well, unfortunately, the French public opinion is somehow accustomed to this kind of attitude coming from Muslim Arab world for some years now. Don't forget that there were long years of debate and controversy around the veil issues, the right or privilege or restriction on women to wear veils in the public sphere. And that also, France is actually for few years now, more than few years, regarded as the front line country which, through the perception in large parts of the Muslim world, is against Islam, which is, of course, something French public opinion does not accept and can prove according to the way the perception is valid here in Europe. But if I may, because as we are approaching the end of this conversation, and if I may just extract some of the things which were said all around the four corners of the world we are assembled to, I would put the question regarding the future in the following terms. I don't know whether my colleagues will agree with me. Yeah. Do we want collectively, as the international community, to have more religion and more religious-minded issues to dominate geopolitics and international relations? Or do we really think in the 21st century that we rather need less of those in the international community in order to assure a more peaceful and more dialogue turn into international global community? That's the question which could help us to think further.
That is indeed a very thought-provoking question. But Hong Jian, it will have impact on geopolitics and geoeconomy. And President Macron has been very active in the Middle East, and he has been very much involved in the Lebanon reconstruction. Do you think this will affect French diplomacy and Europe relations with Turkey and the Muslim world?
Yes, indeed. I think this incident inflect not only the internal, problems in France, and also this external, tensions between France and Turkey. Also, we understand that not only on the issue of Eastern Mediterranean and also North Africa, and also recently in South Caucasus, certainly that there will be some more tensions. And also I agree with the views from our French friend that certainly now in near future or maybe in long term, this kind of tension between the religions will be very, very important part of the geopolitical format.
All right. Thank you, Hong Jian. And thank you, Joab, Serkan, and Zoon. And you've been watching Dialogue here on CGTN. Thank you for watching. I'm Zoon in Beijing. Goodbye.